Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, I am a Singaporean who is currently based in Seattle, working in big tech. I moved to the US about 3.5 years ago, and I spent my first 2 years in the US, living in Upstate New York. And for the last 1.5 years, I have been living in Seattle. So this video will be kind of a 3.5 years reflection about what are some of the pros and cons of living in the US. Especially for someone like me coming from Southeast Asia or Singapore specifically, I will be mostly focusing on elements that directly impacted me, which most likely will be impacting you as well if you are in your 20s or your 30s thinking of moving to the US. The first pro is the people you meet. Before coming to the US, I thought that Singapore was a very diverse place. But after coming to the US, this was a complete eye-opener for me. Coming to the US, you meet people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, coming from different countries, all with unique experiences to share. I remember my first week in business school, I met classmates coming from different states within the US. All grew up from different backgrounds, and I also met international classmates coming from Asia, Europe, South America, Africa, you name it, all with different dreams and aspirations. Getting to know these people really broadened my perspective. And same goes for at the workplace or just meeting up with random people I meet in events or even in cafes. I remember I met this guy who grew up in a rural town in South America, and through hard work, he was able to move he and his family to New York City, the place that he always aspired to be, and live the life that he wants to. It is very interesting and inspiring to always be able to listen to such stories from the people I met. And most of the people I met here are really very genuine, full of experiences to share. So you'll always never be bored living here in the US. The second pro is how easy it is to travel in the US. Due to the sheer size of the country, the abundance of the amount of natural landscape, and just the overall diversity of the culture, it is very easy and convenient to travel around in the US and visit really cool places and landscapes without having to leave the country. Back in Southeast Asia, or when I was living back in Singapore, because most of the countries that we were at are very small, so it is very difficult to visit new places without going through the hassle of leaving the country. And oftentimes we need to take long flights, plan months ahead just to go to that one vacations every single year. So it's really a very big hassle, and oftentimes you wish that you had more budget or more vacation time off within the year to go to more places. On the other hand, domestic travel within the US is very convenient, especially these days when most of us are working remotely, so we can practically work anywhere we want within the country. So for me right now, say I'm staying in the West Coast, if I want to visit Vegas, visit San Francisco, go to the mountains, or stay in some of the national parks, I can just easily go there over a long weekend. And more often times than not, you do not need to plan ahead because the commute is very quick and convenient. And you can go for these kind of smaller trips multiple times throughout the year. So over the past 1.5 years working in Seattle, I have personally already traveled to tons of different places such as San Fran, LA, Denver, Vegas, New York, Boston, and I stayed over the long weekend in many of the mountains and rural areas. So these kind of experiences wouldn't have been possible back then when I was in Singapore. So the third pro is having 4 seasons. Climate might just be the biggest difference between living in the US versus in Southeast Asia, because Southeast Asia is near the equator, so there is no 4 seasons. And I know that having 4 seasons may not be for everyone, but I personally really enjoy having 4 seasons and cooler weathers in general. And just being able to experience spring, summer, fall and winter, engaging in different kind of outdoor activities and seeing different sceneries, this overall experience is just super fun and enjoyable for me. The fourth pro is job diversity and opportunities. US is home to some of the largest companies in the world, and there are tons of international companies who have their headquarters in the US. Therefore, there is tons of job opportunities for skilled workers, no matter what industry or field you are in. And of course, being a foreigner in any country, there will be challenges for you to overcome. And US being such a popular job destination, there is always a high level of competition. And to a certain extent, you kind of need to rise above the competition at times. But I'm overall still very impressed by the diversity of opportunities here in the US. Not only corporate jobs, but also like entrepreneurship and also a less standard path such as like being an influencer, a YouTuber, a streamer. Basically all type of opportunities is highly available in the US as long as you can dream it. The fifth pro is it's relatively easy to maintain work-life balance here in the US. Of course, in terms of maintaining work-life balance, there will be industries such as investment banking and consulting whereby you are overworked no matter where you are. But those unique cases aside, if we compare comparable industry, I personally find that in the US it's a lot more easier to maintain work-life balance. So back in Southeast Asia, especially in Singapore and many of the competitive Asian countries, there is always this hustle culture whereby it's often seen as a must for you to put in that extra hour if you want to climb up the corporate ladder. And it's very common for people to not leave on time and say stay in the office till 7 or 8 p.m. even if they are not very busy. So in that case, usually when you go home, you are very exhausted and you have no time for your family. So here in the US, people generally place a high emphasis on spending time with family. So it is very rare for people to stay beyond their normal working hours in the office. And usually by like 5-6 p.m, everyone has already head home, either fetching their kids from school, bringing their kids to baseball practice, or just spending that quality family time. So overall, I really enjoy the work-life balance, the amount of personal time that I get in the US. Moving to the cons, the first con is visa uncertainty. So as a foreigner working in the US, visa uncertainty is probably the biggest con living here. Of course, being a foreigner in any country, there is always some level of uncertainty, but the level of uncertainty here in the US is just at another level. So in most other countries, as long as you can secure an employment that comes with a work visa, you are mostly good as long as your job is stable. But in the US, that may not be the case because there are so many other factors that can determine whether you can stay in the US. For example, the H-1B lottery system, or whether your degree is STEM, or just general government policy that can change at any time that can impact how long you can stay in the country. So being a foreigner in the US, this level of uncertainty is definitely stressful for many of us. So the second con is food is really inconvenient and expensive here. And this is also one of the biggest challenge coming from somewhere like Southeast Asia to the US. Because back in Southeast Asia, food is normally so cheap and accessible no matter where you are in the country. If, for example, you are dropped in a random place in any country within Southeast Asia, I'm pretty sure you can find cheap and delicious food options within 10 minutes of walk. So in the US, you do not even get close to that level of convenience. So let's say if you are staying in a residential area, it's entirely possible that you cannot find any food within an hour of walk. And for someone who is used to that level of convenience back in Singapore, this was definitely a huge adjustment for me over the past 3.5 years. And to this day, I find it a bit annoying at times whereby I'm busy and I need to think about where can I grab food to eat for lunch, do I need to cook, do I need to plan ahead to meal prep? So this is really a huge hassle for any Asian people coming to the US. The third con is the public transport system or the lack thereof. So for most cities within the US, maybe with the exception of New York, there is no proper train system within the city or between cities. And even if sometimes there is like public buses, it is pretty underwhelming. So most of the time, if you want to get to anywhere within the city, or say like somewhere outside the city, most likely you will need to drive or take like Uber or even like take the plane if it's like further away. It's kind of a huge contrast if you compare to like countries within Europe or like Southeast Asia. Basically taking the train or buses can get you to anywhere you want and you almost never had to drive unless you really want to. And even if you have a car in the US, getting around within the city is also a hassle because there is always a lot of difficulty finding public parking spots. and traffic is often a big problem as well in larger places. So this is just the kind of like US lifestyle that foreigners have to get used to. Here are all my thoughts about the pros and the cons of living in the US. I did not cover every topic, and there are definitely other interesting topics to discuss. For instance, the education system, healthcare, cost of living, and culture, and I may share them down the road. But these topics for now are less directly relevant to me. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments whether you agree with the pros and cons, and I'll see you guys in the next video.